joshesl. Good job, buddy. Okay, let's try another one. This one here. How? How? Yeah, excellent. Okay, now read the full sentence to me. Hold on. Guys, welcome back. It's Eugene, my main chicken, and Josh. We're going to try and discuss input today. Natural input. Sure, we've all got our textbooks which we use, and which some people favor some over others, and that's fine. But as I've always said, we've got to keep English real. So we're going to discuss what input we can use, and more importantly, how we can use it to facilitate the learning experience and the efficacy of our classes. Guys, check out the video, and at the end we'll come back and give you a little bit of a summary. Okay, are you ready? Okay, let's go. How did the cat get up there? I don't know, Eugene. How did he get up there? It's crazy. It's a good question. It's a good question. Welcome to another mini lecture. This one is on input and output. For your listening pleasure, I've decided to break this lecture up into easy to follow sections. First, I'll start by explaining and discussing input. This will include a brief overview of the core ideas and things we need to consider as language teachers. Then, I will discuss the importance of output and ways in which it impacts second language development. As always, I will try to keep it short and sweet, but if you want to know more, I urge you to check out the links and articles on the site, or listed in the reference sections at the end of this clip. So, what is input? Input may be viewed as early exposure to the target language that is around us. Or to put it another way, input can be defined as the language data which the learner is exposed to, i.e., listening and reading. It is important to second language development because without it, there can be no output. In short, this means if you don't hear or see the language, then you can't learn the language. To prove this, I want you to try this very simple experiment. Think of a language you have never heard or seen. For me, it might be Latvian or Russian, for example. Now try and speak that language. That's right, you can't. It's impossible. And this is why, although many people debate different aspects of input, such as the utility of deliberate or incidental input, etc., no serious scholar or professor discounts the importance of input in some way, shape or form for second language development. What is important for us to know, as teachers, is what input is best. Well, let's assume you're all professional, and you've already considered your students' needs, interests, context, and setting of your language lesson. Then the best type of input is said to be input at a level slightly higher than the student's current level, but still, for the most part, be comprehensible. This is what Dr. Stephen Krashen calls comprehensible input. And yes, there are plenty of debates about how we can actually define the right level of input and what does current level plus a little bit mean. My only answer to that is that as teachers, we need to rely on common sense and monitor our students' reactions. If it seems like the input is too hard, then take steps to make it easier. And keep in mind that this idea of comprehensible input being the best is not always true. For example, if you are trying to develop fluency, you might use input or texts that are actually below your students' current levels so they can focus on speed, intonation, and confidence, etc. And don't forget that incidental learning can take place with input well beyond the student's level. And we also have to remember that frequency of input has a big part to play in language development. All of these factors lead me to my main point, which is that although input that provides a slight challenge for your students might be a good rule of thumb for language development in a general sense, the type of input that is best will also require the teacher to consider the goal of the input. It is also important to remember that input might be comprehensible, not due to the language which is used, but because of body language or context of the communication, etc. This type of comprehension does not mean that any learning or acquisition has actually taken place. So as teachers, we need to make sure our students aren't just nodding along and they actually understand the input. This is where ideas such as concept and comprehension checking come in handy. Now let's look at the idea of noticing. To get the most out of the input, it has been suggested that students need to notice or pay attention to the linguistic features that make up the input. It is believed that the act of noticing and deliberately attending to the stimulus may actually lead to intake. But what is intake? Intake may be viewed as the parts of input that L2 learners can actually retain, store, and relate to existing knowledge. It is the intake that impacts the learner's slowly developing and evolving L2 linguistic system. Let me give you a simple example. If I sit down to watch one of my beloved Korean TV shows, then this is input. Intake is what I can actually extrapolate for future use or processing from this TV show. To recap so far. So, we have input, all the language that goes in, regardless of whether it is understood or not. Then we have comprehensible input, the input that learners can understand and arguably learn more from. Then we have noticing, the act of focusing and tending to linguistic items found in the input. And finally, we have intake, the parts of the input that will affect the learner's linguistic system. Got it? Great. Now let's look at output. If input is what goes in, then output is what comes out, i.e., speaking and writing. And why is output so important? Well, there are 5 main ways in which output plays a role in the process of second language development. First, output can develop fluency and automaticity in language use. Second, output allows learners to notice what they know, what they don't know, and what they only partially know. Third, output gives learners the opportunity to try out new expressions and structures. Fourth, output can be used to generate feedback, which can then lead learners to modify their output. This feedback might come from someone not understanding what is said, a recast by a teacher, or explicit correction. And fifth and finally, it has been argued that only L2 production, i.e. output, really forces learners to undertake complete grammatical processing and drive forward the development of L2 syntax and morphology. And what does all this mean for you, the teacher? Well, it means that we really need to give our students ample opportunity to talk in class and engage in acts of meaningful communication, allowing our students to try to use the language they are learning. It also means we need to educate our students about the benefits of output, especially in relation to noticing and finding gaps in their language ability, so measures can be taken to rectify them. All pretty simple, isn't it? Well, before I leave you, let's just go over the key points again. Remember, input, and lots of it, is required for second language development. In general, input that is slightly challenging, but still able to be understood, is often considered to be the most beneficial. Noticing and attending to language features encountered in the input often also proves to be very beneficial to the learner. As far as output is concerned, it is important because it helps students find the gaps in their knowledge, and this makes it possible for students and teachers to tend to these gaps and implement strategies to fill them. Output is also useful as it forces students to make their expressions syntactically correct so they can be understood more easily. To finish off with, I'd like to encourage you to get your students to speak and interact in class. The more mistakes they make, the more they're going to learn because they're going to find their gaps. Guys, I hope this lecture has helped, and I hope you come back again soon. Good job, buddy. That's awesome. You're doing really well. Hi. Okay, just like that. Excellent. Good job. Well, guys, all about input. Krashen suggests a level just a little bit higher than the current level. Just a small challenge, just slowly moving up. Okay? However, we can use input in other ways. We can use it just to get intonation, just to get rhythm. So depending on what you're using the input for, you can manipulate how hard or how easy it is. You don't have to stick to every class being just a little bit harder. But the main thing was, where do we get our input from, our natural input? Well, books, videos, DVDs, or downloads. Legal downloads, kiddies. Legal downloads. Discussed it before. Magazines. Magazines. Okay? Put those on the floor. You also have phrase books, etc. Flashcards. Depending on what you want to do, you can manipulate the input any way you like. But one of my favorites, music. You can listen to it on the train, you can listen to it on the bus, you can just listen to it anytime you like. Input is all around us. Keep it natural, keep it real, have fun. I'm going to get out of here. Eugene, stay sexy. Amen, 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 amen. Amen, 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 amen. Amen, 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 amen. Americano, chua, chua, chua.